Welcome. My name's Javan. I'm an organizer with Service Employees International Union, Florida Public Services Union, and this is our Get to Know the Candidate series. SEIU, FPSU members have a long history here in the city of St. Pete, going back to the 1960s. Today, we represent workers from the city of St. Pete, employees at Pinellas County School District and Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, and adjunct faculty at St. Pete College, among others who call St. Pete home. Our members are the beating heart of the community, getting our kids to school on a daily basis, keeping the city running from the IT department to Parks and Recreation, and educating the next generation. As a public sector union, we recognize the special role elected officials play in representing the communities where our members live and in leading the organizations they work for. The St. Pete municipal elections will be held on November 2nd, and the only way to vote as of the recording of this video is by mail or in person on election day at your polling place. To check the status of your mail-in ballot request or to make that request, to check your voter registration or find out where your polling place is, go to votepinellas.com. We're proud to have endorsed Richie Floyd for St. Pete City Council District 8. Richie is a public school science teacher with a background in engineering, an active union member, and an activist working on campaigns like the Fight for 15, which increased the minimum wage here in Florida. First, I want to say thank you for being a teacher, because teachers are my favorite people. Richie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So your journey into becoming a teacher was a little bit of a roundabout adventure, I might imagine. You left a career in engineering and decided to become a teacher. What was that fork in the road moment for you that led you into the classroom?
I wouldn't say it was just one moment. I became an engineer because I have a keen interest in technology and science. But while I was going to school to be an engineer, I worked as a substitute teacher, and I really enjoyed that work as well. So a few years ago, my wife and I were not both not totally completely fulfilled with our career. She was an accountant, I was an engineer. We decided to take the plunge at the same time and both go into teaching. We had both been substitutes and had a positive experience. And so I thought I would find it much more fulfilling to be able to teach science and engineering to, the next generation of students, and especially students who aren't quite as well off as I had it growing up. And so that kind of led me to the decision. And one thing that really helped push me over the edge was that teaching's a union job. And since I became a teacher, I've had better benefits, better healthcare than I ever had as an engineer working for major corporations.
And that's something that doesn't happen automatically when you're even with a union job. It takes a level of activity and engagement. And you recognize that does make a difference for you and your family. What does that add to your workplace to also have that opportunity to take part in that process of having a union and negotiating for your own benefits and well-being in the workplace?
It's really great. Before I had a union job, there was nothing I could do if I felt I was being treated unfairly, or if I didn't like the conditions that I was working under. The best way to have a say in your workplace, in my opinion, is to be in a union and participate in your union. You have things like collective bargaining that can better your working conditions when you all come together and ask and fight for better working conditions. But then you have things like Weingarten rights and the grievance process that can really protect you from bad faith actors and poor working conditions in the short term as well. And so to go from working a job where none of that was available to me to working a job where it was a huge difference. And like I said, the benefits that were won through collective bargaining and collective struggle were significantly better than anything I had experienced before. And that's really important to me and my family, as I have some health issues, and it was very expensive before I had union healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Now, that engineering job did bring you to St. Pete, and did you come to District 8 right away? Was that your first stop when you moved to the city?
Actually, I spent like 9 months living further north. I guess it was District 2, but it was like the far north part of St. Pete, the Gateway area, before my wife and I bought a home here in District 8.
And you really love that part of the city, and the people who live in it. It's been very welcoming to you. What's a typical Saturday, the kind of things you like to do in your neighborhood with the folks who live there in District 8?
Yeah, so lately Saturdays are just eaten up by the campaign, which, involves canvassing the neighborhoods and talking to voters, sometimes having an event after a canvass where we invite voters out for a snack and a drink and just to chat. Or like last weekend, we had a barbecue with all of our volunteers. But when we're not campaigning, we like to go for a bike ride or a walk around, I guess, the district, but just around our neighborhood. We live right by the main library. It's nice to go on a walk around the lake behind the library, especially, after dinner. A lot of our neighbors are doing the same thing as well, walking their dogs and whatnot. That's nice. We try to get out on the water at times, and I have kayaks. I go out and do that. But as far as things I do around the district, it's just a pleasant place to be outside in my mind. It's older neighborhoods, established neighborhoods, I would say, not the oldest in St. Pete, but established neighborhoods with tons of fruit trees and shade. And it's just nice to be out. Even if it's a bit hot, you can be in the shade.
Mm-hmm. And in your time, you've really committed yourself to not just being, a good neighbor. I would say maybe even a great neighbor in some ways. You really kind of taken on some different challenges, not just the fight for 15, which of course increased the minimum wage across the state of Florida, and that's already kicking in now, and goes, eventually it goes up to 15. But also working on issues like Amendment 4 to restore voting rights to returning citizens, and another number of other initiatives. So activism is a lifestyle for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the same decisions that led me to change careers into one that was more public service based lead me to, just participating in political organizing in my community. I'm fortunate that I've had resources and opportunities given to me throughout my life. Was fortunate to be able to have a knack for science and math that led me to become an engineer. I was fortunate to have parents that worked hard. My dad is a union member as well, and that's provided a good, stable life for us. And so I saw that, really I was lucky, and that even my immediate family outside of my brothers and sisters didn't have all those same opportunities. And so it sort of just led me to, wanting to get involved and make sure everybody has a chance at, affordable housing and a good job with good benefits and pay and just opportunity in general. So that's led me to, just take on political organizing it whenever I get a chance to. And that's what got me into the $15 minimum wage fight and other fights around the city, like things for voting rights and protecting the post office was one thing we worked on last year, environmental issues. And I'll say that I also try to always have a good time while doing it. I don't do it for any pay. I do it out of just feeling a duty, and but so I got to make sure that it's fun. And so that's the way we run the campaign, as well as we have a lot of fun while we do it. We socialize, eat together, and try to have a good time while trying to make the world a little bit better of a place for everyone.
And that's what it really takes, is everybody getting involved to do the piece that they can. And so that's where the fun is, I think, in building community, to see everybody, as they say, many hands make light work. And especially as St. Pete changes, equity is one of those big questions that has come up again and again. How are more people being included in the work in the opportunities that are coming into the city? And that's landing on the ballot this year as well, with the ballot amendments around equity. And we see that in education as well. That's one of the most important places where those conversations around equity are having. How do you see that as being critical for the long-term success of the city?
Absolutely. We're lucky that we've been able to center the conversation throughout this campaign on equity. And that's incredibly important. And I think for the long-term health of the city, it's important because right now what we see in St. Pete is a vibrant city that has opportunity. Like I mentioned, I came here for opportunity, but we have to acknowledge that opportunity is not here for everyone. And it hasn't always been here for everyone. And I think that's what's key when you have this conversation, is remembering like the past and how bad things were for people, and generationally as well, particularly working people and people in South St. Pete, and Black people and minorities. And so, those things don't just get erased overnight. There has to be intentional interventions into the way that we do business in this city, intentional interventions into the way that we interface with our workforce in this city, to make sure that we're lifting everyone up and correcting decades and generations of injustices. And it's like I said, it's not going to happen overnight, but if we center the conversation around equity, we're going to be able to start making a difference, and chip away each and every day at the injustices that are sort of baked in at this point.
Mm-hmm. And housing is one of the most significant areas where those long-term injustices are really hard to overcome. A lot of the redlining and issues that existed in the communities created situations that can be very difficult, even in a generational pace, for people to move out of. And now the housing situation in St. Pete is in some ways reaching a tipping point, where even those who are doing better than others or well off are having a difficult time finding affordable housing. And so there are some who are calling on the city to intervene more substantially. How do you see that housing issue as fundamental to the kind of city St. Pete wants to be?
Yeah, you said it, and I mentioned it before. Like it's been a long time coming. I mean, just from my perspective, I've been fortunate to be able to purchase a home in my district. If I was attempting to do so now, just a few years later, it wouldn't happen. I couldn't afford it. Prices have gone up, I don't know, 50% in the last 3 years. And I wouldn't have been able to do it.
That's you and your wife, combined income.
Mm-hmm. We would not have been able to do, there's no way we could have lived in this home, and we may not have been able to purchase any home because of the price increase on our teacher salary. And so, I think people who are even in houses recognize that this is an issue, and know that, especially if you're an adult and you have kids and you want your kids to live nearby when they move out, like, what are we going to do? Because right now there's nothing that can go on. And if you're a renter, you're feeling it even more, because Tampa Bay is the area of the country where rents have gone up the most in just the past year. And so having said all of that, we got to also acknowledge the things that went on in the past, things like redlining, and just the blocks that have been put in people's way. I know my dad's just never thought he would be able to buy a home, and then in his 30s, when he finally did, he was stunned, because he thought, it's Black people don't buy houses. That's how he felt about it. And so there's just been a lot there's a lot to make up for. And so I think in my mind, the city needs to, yes, absolutely take a more active role. And, we've started to trend in that direction, but I think right now we have to, acknowledge that housing is a right and it is something that everyone should have access to. Um, and in order to do that, I believe we need to move away from a model of affordable housing that subsidizes development and subsidizes the private profit of developers, and towards a more social model, a model that says housing, there should be housing options that aren't just created for someone to make a quick buck off of. There should be housing options that are created to provide for human need. And so we on the campaign trail talked a lot about expanding and improving the public housing that we have here in the city, and doing things like community land trusts to take housing out of the market, that keep the prices stable over the long term, and allow options for people to get in homes and rent places where they don't have to worry about their rent going up constantly forever. And that's the kind of model we're going to have to go towards. And we're also going to have to tie it back to wages in the city, because it's a two-sided coin. We can't support our housing because our wages are too low, and so we have to do all sorts of things like provide opportunity that matches the skills of the city's workforce, invest deeply in increasing the skills of the city's workforce, because when we create new jobs here, we need to make sure that those jobs are going to the people who live here and the people who need them most.
Mm-hmm. Now, a land trust or a housing trust is maybe a new term for people. Can you just say a little bit more about that to help folks understand if they haven't heard that before?
Yeah, I can say real quickly, there's a couple of different models, but the most basic is just it's that you could own a home, or it could be in a rental property. But the most basic model is you own a home, and the land is in a trust. So you own the home. The home is on that land that's in a trust that you lease for a low price, or you purchase into the trust. And the land price cannot go up but a certain amount per year. And so the home gains equity, but not as volatilely and as quickly as the market does. The home price is stable for a long time. And when you go to sell that home, you can get some money out of it, but the price has remained stable because the trust has kept the price down.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of one of the underlying issues is that, as you said, the cost of buying homes has gone up so quickly and so significantly. But to have that stability, to know that when the next generation is ready to buy a home, or somebody is relocating to the city and is looking for property at a reasonable cost, and especially for those who are doing really critical work, like being a teacher, working for the city, any number of fields, police officers, firefighters, who are doing critical work but don't necessarily make a ton of money for that, but still need to have good homes that they can move into, safe communities for their children to live in, grow in. It really does make a difference over the long term. And that's where we start to see those bigger changes, those more sustained changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And having options like this will stabilize not just the people who exist in those options or with those options, but it'll stabilize everybody. I mean, it could stabilize the housing market and create just a situation that's more tenable over the long term.
And you've already touched on a few different challenges, but if you had to list something as number one, or maybe a top three of challenges for District 8, what do you see those as?
So, I mean, I have the things that I talk about the most in campaigning, and housing's the biggest one because it's on everyone's mind. But I usually would frame it instead as, just the economic plight of working people in the district and across the city. Because for a long time, things have gotten more expensive and wages haven't gotten much better. And, our benefits, even I was singing the praises of good union benefits, but every year the boss comes and tries to degrade healthcare and draw things back. And it's just kind of the nature of the system that we're living under right now. So it's really disappointing. So yeah, the economic plight of just working people in the city and in District 8 is the number one thing I'm concerned with, making sure that there's more economic opportunity, that when the city's investing in things that are to create economic opportunity, they're investing in the people first, and as opposed to investing in, profits first. And so and that's sort of the defining difference. Is if we have a strong culture of, or if we have a strong economy that works for working people, we'll have a strong economy that works for everyone. And so that's been the top thing. But beyond that, we also talk a lot about equity, and we talk a lot about the environment as well, because what city we live in, what our environmental conditions are. We had a disaster with red tide this past year that I know the city workers all know all too well about. And we have sea level rise as an imminent threat in our city within the next decade, and storms hanging over us every year. And so, that's been a huge issue for, again, not just District 8, but the entire city.
Mm-hmm. And you recognize that the people of District 8 are, as you said, the people who really keep the city moving. So those are just working class folks who are disproportionately impacted by the very issues you're talking about. How do you see that, just in kind of a very real day-to-day way, as you move through the area?
Yeah, so I mentioned to you before, District 8 is a working class community. A lot of small single family homes, a lot of apartments, a lot of accessory dwelling units in certain neighborhoods, and just regular people that get up and do the work that's required to keep the city humming. We don't have any big houses on the water. There's no water in District 8 outside of lakes. We're in the center of the city. And so, I think that kind of creates an identity in itself. I mean, it can be hard with districts in the city. We all sort of see ourselves as a resident of St. Petersburg and not as a resident of our city council district. But there's definitely a vibe, like a working class like vibe in our district. Everybody sort of has similar conditions that they're existing under, because we live near each other and we have a similar economic status. And so it's created a great community. Like I mentioned before, you see people out walking and you can say hello to them, and that their life really isn't too much different to yours. And I think that's what's best about sort of being in touch with your neighbors.
Mm-hmm. And protecting working class people is something that we had a lot of conversation about that a year ago, when the pandemic was still kind of a novelty, and there was a lot of love and care, concern for essential workers. And unfortunately, a lot of that has started to go away as we have a desire to get back to life as usual. But the challenges of this moment are something that came home for you, because you're in that kind of set group of people who have some pre-existing health conditions that make what's happening with COVID a little more. It's not just a thing that's out there that can affect other people. This is something personal for you. And you had to take some time away from the classroom initially. How are you, dealing with this moment and having to balance that reality?
Yeah, it's been difficult. I was faced with a really tough decision last year, when the pandemic, I want to say at the height of the pandemic, but it's still been so bad recently for us. Faced with a tough decision about, going to work in person while I have an autoimmune disease. And so, I was fortunate to be able to take some time away from the classroom to be able to focus on my health, make sure that I'm not spending a ton of time in crowded places. And honestly, I still ended up catching COVID, and it was absolutely terrible. I was sick for about 8 weeks, almost 2 months. At one point bedridden. It was awful. And so I can only emphasize with people and sympathize with people who, you know, are experiencing similar situations. It's a scary time for a lot of people out there. And I think, especially when it comes to essential workers, people who aren't as lucky as I was to be able to take time off, um, they, I mean, last year there was a lot of clapping and a lot of words given to them, but really, I think it's time to not let that go away and to invest in those people, because those are the people who kept the wheels on the bus as time went on, and a lot of us were able to stay at home.
Mm-hmm. And coming back to District 8, if there was one thing that you could have as a success, something that you would like to bring to the district, a challenge that you would like to see wiped out by serving on city council, what would you say that is?
These one thing questions get tough. So
I'll give you 2 or 3 if it makes it easier.
Okay. Yeah, let me do a couple. So first, I'll say that you know, the first thing on my mind is, like, you know, making working and living conditions better for working people, and that's what it is. And that's not district specific. That's you know, people all across the city, and even outside of the city, is making life easier for working people and life better for working people, because working people should enjoy life. And so that's number one. But some district specific things are, you know, and they all tie back to that, but there's like infrastructure issues, and particularly transportation issues in the district. We have 34th Street in the district, and that's a main bus corridor. If we could do things like make the buses run better, make the streets safer. We've had issues in the Grand Central District, which is partially in District 8, with traffic incidents. Someone was killed not too long ago crossing Central Avenue. We need to make the city safe, the city streets safer for pedestrians and for working people. And we need to do everything we can to eliminate the poverty that we see in the city, particularly in our transportation corridors as well. And so I think if I could leave District 8 having accomplished something, it would be like, you know, safer streets and cleaned up streets, and doing that through investing in our community and not punitive measures.
Mm-hmm. And this is becoming an at-large race, essentially, where people from all over the city have an opportunity to cast a ballot for you. What do you have to say to those people who are living in other points in St. Pete about what you will bring to city council?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I mean, the number one thing is like just making people's lives better in the city, and that goes into having a bright future in our city, not just for working people, but for everyone, particularly when we have an uncertain climate future, you know, coming towards us. And so I talked a lot about you know, the economic justice and the social justice and the environmental justice, and these are things really for everyone, and things that can make our city a better place for everyone who lives here, and not just people in our district. I mean, I'm looking to serve St. Pete City Council and every resident of St. Pete, and represent the residents of District 8. And so I'd say, you know, the plan is to make the entire city a better place with a brighter future. And, you know, what I bring to city council is a youthfulness and an energy that I've shown throughout the campaign, and the amount of doors we've knocked, and the way we've connected to the community, and the way that I am still trying to connect the community today. And that's what I'll do as a city councilor. I'll take an active approach, a more activist approach, and make sure that like everyone in the city's voice is heard in city council. I'll go meet people where they are. You know, it's great to invite people in, but we need to go out and do the work ourselves as a city to make sure that we're reaching people, because people are busy and they don't necessarily have time to go up to City Hall and tell us what they think. But they definitely have thoughts, that's for sure. And a lot of times those thoughts are better than anybody else's sitting up there in City Hall. And so, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the approach that I plan to take.
I'm glad to hear that. And because you've spent so much time on the doors, I'm sure you've had some great conversations Are there any particular conversations that stick with you from people you've met while out in the community talking to folks?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of conversations that stick with me. Some of them are comical, some of them are just fun, good conversations, meeting a neighbor. Some of them are when, you know, somebody doesn't want their door being knocked on, and they aren't exactly the most polite to you. But you know, I think what comes up the most and what's most important are the things that we hear over and over and over again. And so those things are things like housing. It's very clear. The red tide incident that came up this summer was all anybody wanted to talk about for a few weeks. And then what that meant for city services and city workers was a big chunk of that. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of memorable conversations, but it's sort of the aggregate of them as you keep hearing the same things over and over again that really stick with you.
Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up, there's I guess a moment of levity in this moment where we just need to confirm that you are in fact not a Brazilian soccer star who is masquerading as a resident of the city of St. Pete. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah. Okay. So he's not a soccer star. He's a reality TV star.
Okay,
is what
reality
it is.
TV
Yeah.
star.
Okay. So yeah, this past year on Twitter, apparently I look similar to a Brazilian, famous Brazilian, Gil do Vigor, and I believe that's how you pronounce it. He is an economist actually, and a reality TV star. And my headshot is in like I would say a light red colored shirt, but I guess other people would call it pink. That goes, it's my headshots in that color shirt, and he's known for wearing that color shirt. And we do look vaguely similar. We have a beard, tan complexion, dark hair, similar haircut. And so, but really the shirt like matching and the style of picture matching that he's known for is what made it take off. And so got a lot of attention on the internet. Someone on Twitter noticed, and hundreds of thousands of people across Brazil found it amusing. It was in like the largest newspapers in the biggest cities in Brazil. It was on TV there. I now, like, the ex-president of Brazil follows me on Twitter, and yeah, it's been a very interesting circumstance. But I can say, like, you know, it's just been fun too. A little stressful to get that much attention, but really good to connect with people across the world, really. And I immediately started talking about the campaign and what values we were putting forward and fighting for working people. And you'd be shocked that most people in Brazil agree with what I've been talking about on the campaign trail. So it's kind of morphed into, now I just sort of have a little bit of a following from people in Brazil who just appreciate the work that I'm doing here and find it entertaining that I look like someone from there. And actually, Gilles is doing a PhD in economics in California now, and so a lot of his fans are demanding that we meet. But I'm like, California is a lot further away than you think, people in Brazil, but they just see that he's in America, and they'd like to see that happen. So I don't know, maybe one day. And I had never thought about it before, but now I plan to visit Brazil in the not too distant future.
Well, nice. Well, I hope you have time to do that when you become a city council member. Maybe even invite him over for a tour of the city, and have some fun and continue to have some fun with that. Richie, I appreciate you taking some time to speak to our members and the community so that we can get to know you better. I want to remind everyone once again that the election is coming up on November the 2nd. If you haven't already requested your mail-in ballot, you can still do so and receive it in time. If you already have your mail-in ballot, please be sure to vote for Richie Floyd for District 8. We've also endorsed Ken Welch for mayor. We also want to mention our endorsements for Copley Gertis in District 1, as well as Lisette Hanowitz in District 4. All of these candidates received their endorsements because they believe in the important work that our union members do that the city and the community is a better place when all people who call it home have an opportunity to live and grow and to really enjoy the great opportunities that St. Pete has for everybody, and wants to make sure that the future of St. Pete continues to be bright for everybody that calls her home.